you said the word helminths, and just tell the audience, like, what is a helminth?
Yeah, so helminth is basically a parasite. It's a worm. It's the one that I'm specifically working with is Necator. So Necator is a roundworm. It's microscopic. They're tiny. Um, and there's 4 different types of therapeutic worms known at this moment in time, right? So Necator's one, human hookworm. That's the one that I like adore. I have like a love affair with Necator. HDCs are another one, which is rat tapeworm. There's TSO, which is the pig whipworm. And then there's TTO, which is the human whipworm. And all of them are very cool, have different potentials and capabilities. I just like Necator because, one, financially for my patients, it's much more affordable. The dosing on it is, you know, once or twice a year. So it's pretty easy for people to kind of like get into a pattern once we figure out like what does your body tolerate? And by tolerate, I mean at what dose or at what number are we seeing your symptoms resolve while also not necessarily stirring up other symptoms, right? Because again, with too many worms, you can have other side effects. And so it's not without risk by any means. And does it work for everybody? Like, newsflash, nothing works for everybody. Like it's a accumulation of all of the different things that we do on a day-to-day basis that really works, right? But
Yeah.
it's like we can add in some of these additional things to really help boost the system and help support and restore it. So
Yeah.
they're worms. Helminths are
Yeah, they're
worms.
worms. But I want to also go a little deeper. You know, we talked about with Naisha, that was just on, Naisha Winters,
Love her.
who again, another naturopathic doctor working in the field of oncology. We had just talked about a couple of the things that are just an over-the-counter adjunct to palliate symptoms like Tylenol. I think it's almost 17,000 people die every single year in an emergency room from bleed outs from something like an over-the-counter NSAID, which is wild number to me. I was like, man, it's not a number, it's a person's family. So I just want to throw that into context. So when we talk about worms, you know, and you said things can go sideways, like in your experience, what does that number look like to adverse side effects versus people who generally do pretty well? And I also want to just know, I would assume that we aren't having people go to the emergency room and pass away from too many Necators.
No. No. Usually you start to feel it in the body. So um I mean, I've had 2. I guess I'd say I've had maybe 3 patients now who've had things. And by like things go awry, it's like, I'm not sure if this is like solving all of my problems while also not starting other things, right? And so I think a couple of story examples of like what that looks like would be a woman who, started with a few too many, and like that happens. Some people are just really sensitive, and it really created more loose stool in her bowel. And like, they're like, okay, well, like, let's wait it out, see what it looks like at 3 months, because it takes them some time to onboard and really have consistency inside of the system. And it's just like, it never really ended. And so it's like, cool, well, we can kill them. If this is uncomfortable for you, we kill them, right? Because we
Mm-hmm.
have antiparasitics. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's like, we can do it through Chinese medicine herbs. We can do it through different like, Western herb tinctures. We can also do it through different actual pharmaceuticals, right? There's also over the counters, like Reese's pinworm medication is like great in a pinch, and so there's that. And like, she killed and didn't want to do it again, and that's great. I had another patient who was loving helminths and loving how they felt in her body. And we lost touch because we were working together, and then we lost touch, and she kind of like went rogue, and she got herself up to like, multiple hundreds worth of worms infected into her system. And she started having difficulty breathing. Like, when walking upstairs, she started having difficulty breathing. And so it actually, she went to her cardiologist, found out she had eosinophilic pneumonia. So she had what they can do, because how they work, this is my favorite. So how they work, I'm going to take out a little colored pencil here.
And if you're at home, we'll describe it as best we can, but also, again, a good chance to just jump over to YouTube if you want to see the visual representation of how they work with a pencil.
Oh my God, I love it. Well, I usually podcast and walk, so I'm going to try and like zone into my walking self while I talk
Thank
about
you.
this.
Yeah,
For
don't
sure.
go away. This is going to be great.
Yeah.
Stay here.
So good. It's so good. Yeah, listen in. So I like have a leveled pencil, right? So it's like a horizontal pencil. And when our immune system spikes, that pencil turns into something like a teeter-totter. So if you can assume that like one end of that pencil goes up and the other end goes down like a teeter-totter. That's your immune system. The high end of that teeter-totter is the immune system ramped up. It's doing its job. It's like taking care of business. Normal immune response is you need to come back down and become a leveled pencil again, or a leveled immune system again. And so what's really cool is when the Nicator get in, people who have things like autoimmunity or who have things like allergies, right? It's two different sides of the teeter-totter, but like one side's up, it's spiked, it's not coming back down. What Nicator does when it gets into the system is it's a parasite. So one side of this teeter-totter represents more of a like what we call a Th1 response, which is more of an autoimmune response. It's like Hashimoto thyroiditis, think about rheumatoid arthritis, think about things like ulcerative colitis. Those types of conditions hang out here in the Th1 response. On the other side of the teeter-totter are things like parasitic infection, right? So this is a Th2 response. This is what's being stimulated here. When the worms first enter the system, they're stimulating more of that Th2 response because the body's like, ooh, foreign invader, right? There's a parasite on board. We need to spike this side of the immune system. So it starts to naturally bring down that Th1 response just because it's now fighting a worm, which is kind of cool to think about. But what's interesting is once that worm gets into the system, because people are like, well, then don't you have a problem with too much of a Th2 response? And it's like, you would think that. But once they get themselves inserted into the system, they start to spit. And their spit carries over 200 different peptides, so different small proteins that can traverse the lumen of the intestine and basically talk to the immune system and tell the immune system, like, hey, like, let's tune things up. Let's tidy things up a little bit. And the immune system will start to produce a molecule called Treg, or T regulatory cells, because they're being stimulated by these peptides in the spit. And the Treg cells are what tell this pencil to stay level. It's what tells the immune system to shut off. It's what tells everything to kind of come back to level. So it can spike and go up, but it comes right back down, because that's a healthy immune response. Because it goes up and it does the immune thing, and then it turns off. And then if the other side needs to go up, it can go up, do the immune thing, and it can turn off. And so having Treg is super important. If you overdo it though, and you get too many worms, then you have that Th2 response that pops up. And that's really where eosinophils can start to come into the picture, and they play they play an important role. And so, she actually contacted me. It was like 2 years after we had worked together previously. And she had kind of told me her story, and I was like, how many did you get up to? It was like 350. And I was like, you don't need that. Like when she was checking in with me, she was at like 25 and doing great. Like some of her reports to me were like, my gray hair is turning brown and I have thicker hair. And I like, when we talk about hair, I'm a Leo moon and a Libra sun. So hair is like a thing for me. Like I love hair. So when patients are like telling me that their hair is changing and that it feels thick and it feels full and it feels like it's coming in, like she was like, I feel like I'm like aging in reverse by like putting these worms in. But she felt like if she continued, that was just going to continue to get more and more and more, which we come to find with keystone species, again, like the gray wolf. You don't need a ton of gray wolves. If you had too many, you'd totally kill the ecosystem in a different way. But if you have just enough, it's enough to kind of keep everything else regulated and in check.